planning meeting of the municipal year. Exciting. So we'll move forward with agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. And we have
Councillor Lice, Councillor Newby, Chair.
Thank you very much, and Councillor Cole was making it. I was going to apologise for you. Okay, I have to explain why we're in this 4th day and I'm sat in a very large oversized chair. It's because the postal vote slips have gone out and people are postal voting and they're all locked in the committee rooms that we normally use for committees, and the acoustics and the accessibility are better here, so we're at today. So thank you all for coming. Can I ask if we can approve the minutes of the last meeting held on the 20th and 27th? 20th of February and 27th of March. Thank you. Seconded. Thank you. Thank you very much, and I'll sign those later. You know how declarations of interest work, although I'm not sure if anybody has them today. There are no items under the Local Access to Information Act, so we won't be excluding anybody from the room. And public speaking, we have one public speaker, but I'll explain that when we get to that place. So the first item on the agenda, the substantive item, is item number 5, planning application 220756 for Newbury Road Yard.
Thank you, Chair. As a further addendum to the officer report, there's 3 items to add to it. It's been noted that the still rate quoted in section 15 of the report was an out-of-date number and should be the 2023 rate of £126.79, not the rate shown in the report. As well as that, one of the first 3 commencement condition in the report has been removed from the conditions list as the information has been provided and it's all covered by the requirements set out on ecological mitigation on page 88 of the report. An additional objection has also been received, and I'll cover this shortly with the others. So this application is for 6 detached 5-bedroom dwellings at the former Newbury Powerbreaker site on Red Hills in the northwest side of the city. The site is 0.33 hectares in size, and it's bounded on all sides by trees, which are all covered by tree preservation orders. It's also within a landscape setting area. There's a long history of planning applications for development of this site as residential, with the most recent being an outline consent approved in 2017 for 5 dwellings. So as I said there, there's been an additional objection, and the original two objections were submitted, raised concerns over the number of dwellings, stating that 5 on the site would have been sufficient. The further objection was received this morning, which raised concerns over the provision of footpath for occupants regarding reliance on highway works for the scheme to the north, and that the developers should provide a footpath within the site, potentially through third-party land. These matters have been covered in the report, and I will be covering them in my presentation today. The proposed dwellings are spread out through the site, and they will be accessed from a private road from the existing access point onto Red Hills. They all easily exceed the nationally designed space standards and offer large gardens, good light levels for habitable rooms, and no significant overlooking or other amenity impacts. The site is separated from dwellings to the south and to the northwest, and is screened from view by the surrounding trees. In terms of the landscape setting, there are previous approvals for development of this site, as well as approved appeals in the surrounding area, and it's considered the impact on the landscape setting are acceptable, with another reference to the high level of screening by the surrounding trees. Submitted surveys note that there are bat species in the surrounding area, as well as the potential for surrounding trees to be used as roosts. No work to the trees are proposed, and a sensitive lighting scheme condition is proposed on the decision notice. The primary area of discussion with this application has been around the pedestrian links to and from the site. This part of Red Hills has no pedestrian footway, and it's not proposed to install one as part of this application. The Highway Authority were consulted on the proposal and advised that due to the low number of pedestrian movements from the site, it was not necessary or justified to require a footpath to mitigate the level of movements. any works that would be installed would be considered to create an unacceptable narrowing of the vehicle highway in this area as well. Previous approvals on this site did not have the footway, and whilst it's noted that they were for fewer dwellings, the highway authority has confirmed that the proposed 6 dwellings would be similar in movement to the 5 previously approved, and that mitigation would not be required. Discussions were held with the applicant and consultees regarding whether a route through the site would be suitable. However, it was found that this would not be possible. Just trying to find the right slide a second. So the site itself only extends down to about approximately where the gentleman in the high visibility jacket is there. So if a path went through the site, there would still be an element walking along the road of Redfield itself. Any route to the south of the site would fall into a woodland area that's under third-party land and wouldn't be able to form part of this application. And the surrounding trees, which are shown on this plan, that shows all the tree preservation orders, combined with the ground levels, means that unacceptable works would have to occur that would harm the trees and their root areas. It is noted that there is an outline approval to the north of the site for 80 dwellings that is required to provide improvements to Red Hills as part of its conditions. This is for outline approval only, and the full details of any works to Red Hills have not been approved yet, and no reserve matters has been submitted for this application. If it did come forward, it would be beneficial to occupants of this site. However, this scheme, as assessed on its own merits and without reference to that particular highway works, is considered acceptable on its own terms in relation to highway safety grounds. In conclusion, the scheme proposes large dwellings that provide a good level of amenity for occupants. Whilst concerns have been raised over pedestrian safety on Red Hills, it's considered that the low level of pedestrian movements does not make mitigation measures necessary. And the development is, as submitted, is considered acceptable. The recommendation put forward to the committee today is therefore for conditional approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do any members have any questions? First of all, Councillor Barnett, then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. My question is also maybe Simon Curran can help, and also Chris and Noreen, whoever can give me the comfort on it. Reference is made to the development on Red Hills and what may or may not happen as a result of reserve matters, which I understand. And I understand the highways who aren't here this evening, which is a bit disappointing. Perhaps we can get the meeting a bit closer to them next time so they can attend. The fact that this, in agreeing with this, doesn't prejudice that, and vice versa, insofar as what the point I'm making is that when we come to deal with those reserve matters, it's not going to be said, oh, well, you've agreed the Newbury site now, and so therefore you have to agree this particular traffic. So as long as you can assure me that that's not the case, and that will be dealt with as a separate matter at the time, I'm content to do that. So I need to hear that assurance, and it will need to be minuted accordingly, Chair.
As long as the leader's happy with you. You asked him, Simon, so.
Councillor Bayer has asked a really valid question there. It's a well-known aspect of planning law that every application has to be determined on its merits. The report that's in front of you there goes into a detailed assessment about the Canopy site. It does make reference also to the Red Hills site to the north, which was granted on appeal. The same rules would apply to that reserve matters application should it be received. It would have to be considered on its own merits. So taking the application that's in front of you this evening, the officer's report clearly sets out there are no highway reasons or objections to this application, irrespective of the site to the north. For the site to the north, if and when that application comes forward, whatever you decide tonight on this application will have no bearing when we consider those reserved matters. What is relevant to that application and the reserved matters is that there is an obligation on that application to come forward with a highway solution which abuts partly this site but goes further down to the roundabout. So that would be an absolute consideration when that application comes forward, irrespective of what you decide tonight.
Are you happy with that?
I agree with what the opposition says.
Okay. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I have a few questions, please. Chris, I wonder if you might say again what your second point was in relation to the conditions that have been removed or completed on page 88. That's my first question.
So I haven't got the page numbers on my copy here, unfortunately. The first of the conditions in the report is a pre-commencement condition for an ecological mitigation and enhancement strategy. That has been removed as it is already covered by information that has already been submitted, which is the condition on. I might be the wrong one. So that's on page 88. Sorry, I read the wrong one. Which is an ecological mitigation condition on page 88, which states that the recommended measures set out in the submitted information have to be carried out in full, which is the same information we were originally asking for in the pre-commencement condition.
So, through you, Chair. So you're saying that that has now been provided because in the information that was submitted, it said that the back survey and the other aspects, license door line surveys, that the ecological survey wasn't complete. So now you have seen a full ecological survey and it's got no detrimental impacts on this site that's a protected landscape character.
That is correct, and it was run past our ecologist to make sure.
Okay, thank you. So my second question is about, you said as well that no trees are going to be removed. And in the section, I think it was, there's two sections marked G, one by the entrance, one on the other side, and they look like they're having trees removed. So are you talking about no trees for TPOs or no trees in general?
As far as I was aware, there was a bit of work to trees and carrot, and I believe that was what was set out in the submitted arboricultural assessment.
So maybe have a look at the part of the sections, and there was going to be 50% of the trees removed on the G sections, which is on the other side of the road. So just as well, just on the issue around transport, the comment has just been made around vehicle movements and a more significant slide. So I've got two questions about that. In terms of whilst transport movements may not add significantly to the road network, how are people, so how my child, if I move there, get safely to school within that lane, and how would my child get to go and play with the people who live in the estate next door to the north and to the west? Is there going to be any joining up access points between the two developments? So that's my last question.
As stated in the report, there is no connecting footpaths through this site. I'll go back to the slide previous. You can see this area of woodland here. That is in third-party ownership and doesn't form part of this application, so it's not reasonable to require to be able to get a connecting point through. And as far as stated, they do not see that it's necessary for a footpath or other footway to be installed on road hills as part of this development.
And my question was to the development that's already been improved and appealed. Well, then will there be no access point from that side of the route to the north, to the west, at the top?
Oh, so in terms of...
It'd be completely locked in, and the only access will be to the road, basically.
I'm not sure I understand the question there, sorry. I've got a slide showing what is proposed as part of the development to the north, which is...
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify that. So could I have an answer to my question about the trees, please?
I just checked on the site plan there, and the trees at the entrances are being retained. As far as I know, I'm aware of it.
Councillor Hanford.
Yes, Chair, 2 questions. Page 70, the representation of the Exeter Civic Society, really just to question the officers on practice and policy in terms of the use of the site for residential use. It's not the most efficient use of land and density level and smaller dwellings, etc. I'm just looking at that in comparison to the Alphington one that went through previously, where there was an emphasis on squeezing in more, but here, I guess, apparently the officers are content that we have these large houses. The second question I have is around the point that Councillor Royce just alluded to about the 5 vehicle movements. What's the rationale and the calculation on this? Because these are huge houses, 5 bedrooms, double, triple garages, and we only need to look just down the road at St Peter's Mount to see that similar, if not smaller houses, have 3 or 4 cars, if not more. So where is the rationale that there's only going to be 5 car movements for this development? I could even see potentially these houses being used as multi-ops, perhaps for people, doctors from the hospital or whatever, being 5-bedroom properties, and therefore I simply don't understand why they did it. It's only 1 car movement per house. How realistic that is.
Firstly, in density, I queried that when it first came to us, because you know that I think the high density is better. In this case, it would not be appropriate because we've already lost an appeal that's been approved, or application's already been approved for 5 sites, and this is increasing density on the site. That makes sense? We'd like to answer on which side.
So in terms of the highways agreement, there are parking standards. So although the parking standards at the moment in the residential design guide set maximum parking standards, so that was what everything has to be calculated on, which is that there is a total number of cars that would be expected to be there, not that there would be a car area of the dwelling. Highways did assess the application and consider that it is an acceptable level of movements that will be occurring, and that no mitigation measures are required for it.
There we go. I'm not going to pretend to tell a county councillor that the decisions are highways and not ours, because I'm sure he knows that. But yeah, you know where we are.
That, again, very valid questions. Again, what is in front of the committee this evening is an application for 6 dwellings. Previously, this council approved an application for 5 dwellings, and the highway access was judged to be satisfactory. In addition to that, the other material consideration that carries significant weight is the previous use of the site as a car reference. In addition to the number of vehicle movements, will also be significantly different types of vehicles gaining access and egress, particularly in relation to it being a car purpose. So the judgment that the highway officers made is to balance those circumstances. So the judgment is that this proposed application will not result in any significant increase in traffic movements, both in terms of volume and nature, and therefore the highways officers advice is that there's no reason for objection on highway grounds.
And then let you come back, Councillor.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that because we're talking about vehicle movements. We haven't talked about sustainable travel options to promote sustainable modes given the type of development and its location. So, you know, there is a bus route down the hill, People will have to walk there, children will have to get to the school, so this will become car dependent. So what is the travel plan for this site, please?
There is no requirement for a full travel plan for this site due to scale of development. That being said, it has been noted that it is relatively close to bus stops. It's a 5-minute walk down to the closest bus stops, and it is a 12-minute walk to the closest primary school. In terms of the movement, it comes down to highways again saying that it is acceptable as submitted, and they haven't raised any concerns over any aspect of this.
So it's acceptable on what grounds? Is it just around safety, or is it on technical?
I think, if I was listening correctly, because I might not have been, the thing that's said at the beginning is that the site is not large enough to have to provide any kind of sustainable transport plan. That's what I heard. But anyone would like to tell me I'm wrong?
That is correct.
Doesn't mean it's right. Councillor Moore, it's just all there. Right. No one's got any more questions. It's time for a supporter to speak in favour, because we've only got a supporter speaking in favour today. You are speaking for that, I think. There's a button in the middle with like a shouty voice if you need to press. You get 3 minutes, and I will interrupt you when you get to that point.
Thank you.
His name is Stuart Atkins.
The application site is a previously developed site and is recognised as brownfield land within Exeter's brownfield register. The principle of redeveloping this site for residential development has already been established by previous planning approvals. The development will bring forward 6 well-designed quality dwellings in a sustainable location. It will provide much needed housing for Exeter, making an important contribution to the government's objective of significantly boosting the supply of new homes. This development will bring a redundant and contaminated site back into use following its remediation, a strategy for which is included within the application. During the application, concerns were raised regarding accessibility by foot to and from the application site. I'm a technical director at Stuart Michael Associates Limited. We are consulting engineers and transportation consultants, and have been engaged by the applicant to provide an overview on this consideration. My appraisal has had regard to the existing conditions on Red Hills, the planning history of the site, and the scale of the proposed development. Red Hills is a rural lane that is subject to a 30-mile speed limit. It is lowly trafficked and is designated as part of the National Cycle Network. Selection for this network would have regard to the speed and volume of traffic. Red Hills is in part a recreational route for cyclists, walkers and equestrians, as well as providing vehicular access along Red Hills to nearby communities. The application site is located a short walk, some 105 metres north of the roundabout of Red Hills and St. Peter's Mount. Currently, there is no footway along this section of the lane. For pedestrians that may walk this short distance along Red Hills, there is good visibility along a straight section road with good surfacing and a street lighting column on the approach to the junction. Red Hills has experienced a good road safety record, with only one slight incident reported in the past 5 years over the section between Exeter Lane and Litchfield Road. The incident did not involve a cyclist or pedestrian. It's also relevant to note that changes to the highway code have placed a greater responsibility and duty of care on drivers and cyclists to afford greater priority and safety to walkers and equestrians. In response to the previous application for 5 dwellings, the local highway authority advised that it had investigated the need for any off-site highway improvements, footway improvements, and it concluded that the levels of pedestrian demand from this development will be low hence on balance, it is felt that a footway would not be required.
Okay, thank you very much. You've run out of your 3 minutes, I'm afraid. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Violet and then Councillor Moore?
Okay, thank you. I know you've got professional qualifications and up there. I have to tell you, I believe you're absolutely wrong, and you don't quite understand the nature of the problem there. But that aside, you give technical advice. Did you or your client give any consideration to the fact, well, you know, we could resolve for the homeowners that we intend to sell our homes to, right, would want perhaps a little bit of comfort in knowing that their children or loved ones in accessing Litchfield Road in parts of the city by foot or indeed by cycle, if you actually put on the development side of the thing a small footpath and cycle lane to join up at the bottom of St. Peter's Road. Did you consider that at all as perhaps what I would call good planning?
I asked the applicant, had they considered a footpath through to connect further down the lane, but the physical constraints preclude that, both in terms of the height difference and in terms of impact on the preserved trees.
So, sorry, Chair, I must come back. With all respect, you've given the applicant's view. It's your view. You've been paid to give the view. You're the engineer. You should know whether it is, and you should say to the applicant, I think that's a good idea, or you ought to do that, as opposed to saying, otherwise the applicant just as well be there, and not your good self, to be quite honest.
No, I asked the applicant had they considered that option, and I wasn't aware of land ownership constraints, which there are between the boundary of the site and St. Peter's Mount. So any provision of footway along that section would be relatively short, and then it would have to come down a considerable height and land on the lane. So I was content with the advice that he had been given by the tree experts and viewing the topography myself, that it was probably disproportionate to consider trying to achieve something which would have harm on the trees.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Councillor Lang, has covered the issues that I wanted to raise. I have another question though in terms of after the remediation of the site, will the land be to such a state that it will be safe to grow vegetables to eat?
If you talk through, he's ready to speak, so you have to speak for him on the ground. So he'll have to give the answer. You can tell, sorry, I forgot your name, Stuart. If you tell Stuart, he can answer, but we only have one speaker on that. Just get to technical advice so you get full answer.
Could I just ask you again for the question?
Thank you. So my question is, if people grew vegetables in their garden, would they be safe to eat as a result of the works to decontaminate the land? Would it be undertaken to such an extent that you'll be able to say, yes, it's safe to eat their vegetables?
I think yeah. I understand that there will be a decontamination requirement, a condition, I believe, and details of how they will treat gardens as well as the site in general would be an obligation under that submission. So I can't personally answer your question today, but that can be covered by condition.
You, before we go into debate, you might want to ask Chris about the technical condition side and everything about it, okay? I think he might have an answer for you. Okay. Councillor Hanford.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to query the statement that you made in regard, you said, quote unquote, that this was a low traffic area. I have to say to you, I've been the county councillor there for almost 20 years, so I'm very familiar with the highways and byways there. And certainly at peak times, in the morning and the evenings, there are tailbacks and queues all the way up and down Red Hills. And even when it's not like that, the traffic can go more than 30 miles up the hill and down again. So it's not, in my experience, for a significant part of the day, what I would describe as a low traffic area.
Well, I can't say I've been there more than twice, and when I've been there, it's been lowly trafficked, and speeds have been within the 30-mile-per-hour parameter. 5 houses or 6 houses isn't going to generate a significant amount of movement by any mode, and hence the County Council, in my view, has taken a balanced view that the impact would be minor, negligible, and therefore it's acceptable in its current form.
Whilst I'm willing to accept what highways have given us, because that's the information we have and that's what it's to work with, I think Councillor Barlick knows how regularly I drive back from Cornwall and say to him, I won't pass your house because the M30 is closed. So I understand completely where you're coming from. Do we have any questions before we enter debate? Oh, sorry, thank you very much. You don't have to move away because you're sat there anyway, but thank you for your time. Does anyone have any questions for clarification before we head into debate? Councillor Moore.
I think you'd just like to ask my question again about the safety of food grown on site that might be eaten by tenants. Seen the report, just want to know whether it will be sufficiently safe, because I have known houses built on land where people have been told they're not allowed to eat vegetables grown on their land. So I think it's quite important that we're really clear what this report is saying and if it's safe.
I do not have the information available about whether any food grown on the site will be safe to eat or not. That being said, phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 contamination report have been submitted with this setting out the remediation measures, and they have been assessed by our environmental health team to ensure that it is up to the required British standard and that the contamination is removed to the required levels. Anything more than that would normally fall outside of the requirements of the contamination remediation methods.
Okay, in that case, if everybody is content, I'm going to open the debate. I think Councillor Barlick would like to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I make no secret of the fact, and people know that I've been concerned about the road safety and some of the consequences of the potential actions that may or may not come forward in the Highways Department's method of trying to deal with the situation. I was on the planning committee, was it in 2018, which approved the 5 homes, and I would stand by that now. But this is something which I do consider, and I suppose personal experiences bring you to form your views on a number of things. If you would like to join me, Mr. Atkinson, any Saturday night between 9 and 10 o'clock when I'm walking back from the night out up that hill, you will see how dangerous it is. Okay, no problem, nor will there be. My concern is, Chair, my concern is on this application that we will be having 5 homes, which in principle I have no problem with at all. You will always hear me supporting people to live in homes. I have no problem with the density on this particular one. They've done the viability, and obviously they've done. But good planning would have determined an alternative to bring a footpath and a potential cycleway to allow, never mind people like me and many other people in Exeter who may travel down that road, but the residents of that potential development, and in particular their young children. It will be. Councillor Moore has drawn the fact that children wanting to access the school bus going down to Litchfield Road. It would worry me as a parent, as if Jeremy and Jemima were out there wandering around or going down that road of the night time or even in the day. Traffic goes fast, it's a hill. People tend to press the accelerator to get up the hill. There's a perception of speed. They will go up there in that way. It is dangerous. And two cars, even now, Chair, cannot pass effectively. Okay? And so you have to be quite assertive as a pedestrian. So it may well be about accidents, and clearly the accident that took place there less than 2 months ago on the corner of Barley Lane is not part of this, and it was quite a nasty traffic accident there, of which the police attended. I did take photographs of it and everything else. It was quite nasty of an evening. Now my concern is that we are subjecting people to going out on this road which is not safe, with the promise that something may happen to mitigate it coming round the corner is not good enough, in my view. So I will be, at the end of the debate, Chair, moving to refuse this for the highway reasons, much of which I've said, because the solution is not sequential, in my view, because you do not know whether or not the Red Hills site will come forward. If a year's gone into it, they've got 2 years to go, and still the reserve matters have to be dealt with within this committee. You've answered me, which you told me that this does not prejudice any of that, which I'm pleased to hear. We spoke about any trees. Now, my count was walking down that hill, ducking the cars one afternoon. I counted 18 trees, which would end up being removed. 18 trees. Not quite on the scale of Plymouth, but 18 trees to be removed. That's okay then, isn't it? Or is it? There is, what I'm saying, Chair, there is a sensible alternative to get these homes away with a sensible working together, even with the Red Hills site, a joined up approach, good planning to make sure there is safe access to cyclists and pedestrians on the other side, whilst maintaining the rural nature and setting of this road going out to Whitstone. Whitstone is a busy place. You've guessed it, Chair, what I'm about to say. I live there. It is a busy place. Traffic's up and down there all the time, round and through there. Councillor Hannaford will tell you in a few moments how long it may take for families to get to school there, because even if they were to access Exeter Lane, you've still got to run the gauntlet going to your right or to your left. Chair, I don't normally do this all the time. I'm quite passionate about the highway situation. You came on, many of you came on the site visit, you all saw it, you all witnessed it, and we all know it doesn't make sense. I am not against housing on this site. I like the sound of this development. I think it will add to the community, but there is a better solution for road and traffic safety, and more important, safety for pedestrians and the people who will live here in the future. There is a sensible solution to it which can be obtained. And so, at the end of the debate, Chair, I would want to move refusal of this application. Thank you.
Before I bring in Councillor Hannaford on procedure, we vote on the recommendation that's before us, and if that falls, we move to the next step. Councillor Hannaford.
Thank you, Chair. In the beginning, I think it is disappointing that it is acceptable apparently that a footway isn't available as part of this development. I know we will get something later on as and when other things happen, but nevertheless, I think that it is poor that that's not in there. I completely echo the comments from Councillor Bayani about exploring that link down in the corner of the development, which I think would make this sustainable, because I don't think at the moment this development is sustainable. And just that, I understand what you actually said about the geography and topography of the place, but again, that makes all of the other arguments clear. In terms of the highways generally, this is a very dangerous part of Exeter. I mean, dare I say, I think many vehicles have to go more than 30 miles off Redhill because it's so steep, they might roll back down again, quite frankly, Chair, because it is like that. Quite frankly, it's one of the steepest parts of Exeter. Probably I would say only I anti-drive rival in terms of the steepness of it. So you know, it is very dangerous. I think it was about 15 years ago, I lobbied the County Council when Michael Brown was the chair of that to get the roundabout in by St Peter's Mount to help it was safe. If you imagine how bad it was when that wasn't even in there, because you know, it was a free-for-all, quite frankly, and you don't get money out of the County Council lightly. I think it was about 300,000 at the time, and that was in recognition of the dangerous nature of the area. Again, you would have seen, I think only today or yesterday, I keep plugging away about equestrian safety on social media, etc. And that is done in no small measure because we do have the stables in the area, and there's a lot of horse riding going on in the area as well as, and there have been very serious incidents of them with horses. Perhaps they don't always get reported. And bearing in mind, I think a lot of the work done at the stables is with children with disabilities and children generally. That's another complication in the area. I can't accept what you've said about 12 minutes to the local primary schools. Again, that maybe as the crow flies down Exeter Lane, but it isn't like that, Chair, as you know. It's all Exeter, it's a bit like the roads of the 7 hills, isn't it? You know, I mean, and it's steep. To take a small child to the nursery or a parent in a buggy or anything along that back lane, that would take much longer than 12 minutes, particularly on the way back up. And this is also on the cusp of 2 catchment areas because some of the children would now go to St Gabriel's at Boston Rentals, which was Rentals Primary School. And again, it's a huge journey for a small person to take. By the time they got there, they need another nap and a glass of milk before they started because it's so steep. So we have put in some mitigation, haven't we, around the Exeter Lane in terms of cutting traffic off over the years and tried to make it a bit more safe. But there's still the interface with the agricultural vehicles in Exeter Lane to access the fields. There's still a lot of cattle farming in some of the fields, etc., and all that going on as well. So it is a working area as well. But in all seriousness, in addition to what Councillor Bialik has said, I simply don't think that this is a sustainable site. It's a car-driven site. Bus links are poor and tenuous because you have to go down a very dangerous stretch of rural roads to access the bus stops in Lichfield Road when they turn up, of course, which is another issue. And I think surely our policies are that we don't want to have car-driven developments. We want sustainable developments that link into other housing developments. Like Councillor Bialik, I'm not against this being developed in principle for housing. If it could be made sustainable, it will form perhaps a piece of the jigsaw of a larger housing area. At the moment, I simply don't think it's sustainable. I will be voting against it, Chair, and I will be happy to second Councillor Bialik's refusal as and if and when we get there.
Go, Councillor Sutton, and then I'll continue, Councillor Mitchell.
Right, thank you, Chair. We're here to make decisions, and we're often here to make difficult decisions. And I think it's rare, it's not unknown, but it's rare that we have a decision that is 100% clear-cut one way or the other. And I know everybody has spent a great deal of time looking at this application. It's already been said it's a brownfield site. It is appropriate for development, notwithstanding the concerns about decontamination. Goodness knows there's going to be some decontamination needed, given what's been going on that site for many, many years. And I know, looking at the papers, that there have been 6 applications relating to this site since 1998. So clearly it's been difficult because None of those up until this one have actually come to fruition. We're looking at, we have a site visit. I know a significant number of us have been there either because it's on our patch or because you came on the site visit. We went on the site visit on a nice, bright, sunny morning where visibility was good. It wasn't rainwater running down the road, and the council were actually cycled there to her credit as well. Sorry?
It was a bit pink, you're right.
Well, give Councillor more credit, she made my life. But it is a worrying site in terms of the traffic and the highways. We've heard about it being a 5-minute walk down the hill to the bus stop. I'm less worried about the 5-minute walk down, I'm more worried about the 12-minute walk back up again, because, as has already been said, it's a very steep hill. And I honestly am at a loss to know why highways have come to the decision that they have, because it's a kind of self-fulfilling principle, really, isn't it? You actually say it's low traffic and people won't have to use their cars, but people make judgments themselves about whether or not it's safe. And if they do, it's not safe to walk or to cycle, they will get in their cars and they will drive. So it stops being low traffic because they're using their cars. Having said all that, we have spoken with highways. I really hope that the applicant has spoken with highways about this and considered putting in some kind of footpath route there. And if they haven't, I would really encourage them to go back and have another go at doing it. But I am mindful of the fact that we have very strong steer from the highways experts that this application is acceptable. And I'm also mindful of the fact that ransom strips, land not in the ownership of the applicant, are part of the consideration in terms of how you might put in some kind of off-road footpath. And again, we cannot condition an application to actually put a footpath or some kind of access through land that they do not own. It is not within our gift to do that. We have to make a decision on the basis of what is in front of us. As I said when I started, decisions like these are very difficult. I don't think this is as good an application as it could be. But I have agonised over this, and I did go on the site visit, and I've read the papers a number of times, and reluctantly, I am going to support the application for approval, but with the caveat that I really would implore the applicant, if this is agreed, and that's my own certain, that they would go back and have another look and talk to the owners of the ransom strip and to highways and try and come up with something. Because notwithstanding the fact that even would be a steep footpath, even a steep footpath with some steps is better than no footpath at all. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst one is sympathetic to the concept of housing on the site, one wonders how many more houses would have to be put on the site before the county council were concerned on highway issues. My concern is about the safety of the pedestrians and the cyclists from this site and the neighbouring properties and in the area moving up and down narrow down lane. This increase in population will increase the traffic load there, as we've already pointed out. We know that as a society, particularly possibly the income of the people who will be living in these properties, that delivery vehicles will be a standard practice for a number of these properties. They won't be going to the corner shop to do that. So there's an increased volume of traffic there. We all saw on our visit, it is a traditional Devon high-height lane. There's very little you can do besides making it single track and putting pavements, etc., which will cause even more problems. The answer, as always been said, is to look at future-proofing this in relation to what might be happening elsewhere as well, to provide that pedestrian linkage. And I'm very concerned, like other members of the Highway Authority, are not here this evening to answer our legitimate questions. We're in a vacuum of saying we have grave concerns about this development, not from a housing perspective, but from the sustainable transport position and the safety of pedestrians and cyclists there and in the future. And we'd like answers. And that's why I, as with other members, will be supporting Councillor Bale in his amendment.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Paul.
Yeah, there. Councillor Mitchell, yes, I fully agree with what you just said. I think one of the advantages of having a debate like this is I get to listen to respected councillors who have either lived or indeed represented these areas and know these areas. And so it's a great pity that experts from highways cannot be here this evening. But I myself have lived in that area for 12 of the last 13 years, and like the three councillors who represent or live there, I'm aware of the problems. The issues highlighted in back footpaths, quite rightly, back linkage. Very concerned with what Councillor Ward was asking about, can you actually produce safely the road in your own garden, and that one doesn't seem to be clear at the moment either. I think there's too many questions. I think it could be another application in its present form. I did not support it this evening, Chair.
Okay, get the feeling in the room. I'm going to allow the Director of the Planning to talk to you for a moment, because I think there's some clarity we need on some areas.
Thank you, Chair. So, clearly hearing concerns that are being expressed, I think we need an opportunity to let the committee to clarify those areas of concern, and equally the officers to comment on those areas of concern, particularly in relation to the prospects of success, should the committee be minded to review the application, and then for those issues to be considered at appeal. So there's two things: we need to clarify the areas of concern, then for the officers to comment on those areas in relation to potential appeal.
Councillor Bartlett, would you like to lead on reasons for refusal, because you seem to have some very strong opinions?
Well, refusal, Chair, I can say, if I come across that, I'm against it. I am not against the principle of 5 or 6 houses on this site. I think it will add to the community. And, okay, you've alerted me. What I'm trying to say is if there was a deferral, if the applicant was engaged to say, is there an alternative, then I would go down that route. Otherwise, my issue from the highways would be, it is highways related, that we are against it.
So thank you, Councillor Bartlett. So in terms of commenting on the prospects of the reason for refusal based on highway plans, first thing I'd like to say is that I do consider this to be good planning, to include a safe pedestrian route within the confines of the site. The question I would ask the committee to consider is, can that be considered reasonable, given all the material considerations that are in front of you, including the previous considerations when the planning permission was granted for the 5 homes in 2018. So I would advise the committee on this highly unlikely of success at appeal for a reason for refusal based on those highway plans. I say this for 2 reasons. Firstly, the precedent has been set in 2018 consent for 5 homes. I would argue that an inspector would not judge the additional homes to be so significantly worse to require an alternative highway solution. Secondly, even if you did consider that a footpath within the confines of the application site were necessary, would that footpath but still provide that safe means of access and egress, given that it could only be within the contents of the site itself? You've heard already that third-party land surrounds the site, so it would not be possible in planning terms to connect that footpath to other means of safe access along the road. Final point to make is that, notwithstanding those two issues, the applicant has provided information in relation to some of the technical difficulties that need to be overcome to provide that short section of footpath within the confines of the application site. So I'll let Simon come in a moment in relation to the sorts of considerations that the planning inspector will take into account, not only in terms of whether that was reasonable grounds for refusal, but also whether that in fact was so unreasonable that it could result in the application of costs to the council should the appeal be upheld. So,
Yeah, can I, sorry, Councillor Moore has put her hands up, and I don't know if it might be better for her to speak, and sorry. Might be better for her to speak if the microphone comes up to address after, so.
Thank you. I am moving about issues around childhood, but I do have a couple of other areas of concern that I have raised through my questions. So this site is important because it is a designated area of local interest for nature conservation in a designated landscape setting. So this is important to the questions that I've raised around the ecological report, which we've heard has been fully presented, but obviously the committee hasn't seen that. So, and secondly, the issues of decontamination, so which talks about capping, and then it sort of has options for the site. But I do think there is an important issue to be established about whether people will be able to use their gardens for growing and eating food from, and that isn't clear to me from the reports. And obviously, maybe it's because I'm not a technical expert in this, but it's really not clear from the information that I've seen that this meets the status that we should be expecting of a development in such an area.
I'm going to bring Councillor Hammond as well. If anyone else thinks they've got something to say, can you stick your hand up and then we'll do it at the end, okay?
This is all the reasons to it.
Yes.
So, Chair, I think it's important in terms of whichever way we might go, but I think it's important to look at what is there now. And in terms of St Peter's Mount and the neighbouring development, there are walkways down through Hereford Road and through Litchfield Road, which do, so if you live in St Peter's Mount, you don't walk out on the main carriageway of Brentford for all the reasons that colleagues have said. It would be dangerous and it would be unwise. So there are ways that you can walk down, get the bus, walk down to school safely using pavements that don't pose those risks. I think if something on site could be found, you could go for deferral, for example, and I accept the topography is difficult. But to me, I think that would answer so many questions, because then people would have a choice and an ability to keep safe and access to schools and public transport safely, unless they want to make a car journey. And I think that would end those concerns and open up the site for development and to make it sustainable. But I would say as a council, I think we've already set a precedent in terms of previous decisions and our policies in terms of some of the developments in your area that have been turned down because we did not think that those developments were sustainable, because they did not have public transport link, that they did not have the car moving, and as a council I thought we had policies about sustainability and walking and cycling.
We also lost our appeal on those.
Well, maybe, but also, Chair, I think if we can still make those points around sustainability. And I think in a way, with all due respect, Chair, if members on balance, after careful consideration, do want to go down the route of refusal, I think it's holding on the officers to help us come up with some sustainable reasons for that, and their role in playing that.
In planning law, we have to come up with the reasons they turn it into something for us. It's our decision, and you know that, you've sat on enough planning committee, so it's not up to them to make our reasons for refusal. They've already made their recommendation, it's in the document you're looking at, so that they can't do that. But what they can do is, and I think it's important, is we understand the outcome of the decision we're making. That's why I'm allowing them to do that. Doesn't mean we have to make the same decision, but they've got right to tell us what the impact might be. Councillor Mitchell.
Just following on from what Councillor Hanford said, Is there a third option? We're saying yes, we're saying no. Is there a position where as a committee we can defer until the highway authority are here to answer our questions? Because all the questions I have were about public safety, cyclists, pedestrians, and the potential of development on this route, the impact it will have on whether we will future-proof this. It's only the highway authority who can give us those answers. I think they should honestly be here to answer. It's not the developer's issue, it is an issue with the highway authority.
Right, then how's everything consistent? We're going to respond to those comments.
So just pick up that last point. So you've seen the highway officer's advice. He's not able to speak for himself. I would doubt he will say anything different to what he's given written advice for. So his advice is very clear. In highway terms, this proposal is acceptable. In terms of the alternative, if that's the right phrase, for a car park, sorry, for a footpath within the confines of the site, and the opportunity to defer your decision tonight for officers to go and consider that with the applicant. We have already tried that effectively, have approached the applicant personally and asked for a meeting where we could consider that issue. The applicant refused that offer and came back with a report of evidence, if you like, on the technical reasons why he didn't consider that to be a viable option. So some of that technical information is in the officer's report tonight. So what I'm really saying is that, in my opinion, it's highly likely that the applicant would enter into those negotiations, more likely that they would submit an appeal for non-determination.
What about
Contamination.
So in terms of contamination, I'm not sure on the technical details about what the level of safety and the exact standards that it has to go to, but every report and every stage of it will be assessed by our environmental health team to ensure that it does meet the required standards. I'm not sure whether that means it is suitable for food growing, but it will meet the standards required for decontamination of land for it to be safe to live on.
Chair, can I ask to move to the vote, please?
No, we can't, because someone's in the middle of speaking, and I also asked you to make a point at the end of the meeting. So can we move forward with listening to them, and then we'll go to the vote?
So we just want you to let Simon now just to give some general pointers to the kinds of considerations that the planning inspector would give away to considering reasons for refusal.
Thank you, yes. So there are some, just to make some general points, a substantive award of costs could be made against the City Council should an inspector on his own volition or upon receipt of a cost application by the applicant grant all those costs against us in some of the following examples. So where we have failed to provide evidence to substantiate each reason for refusal on appeal, where vague, generalised or inaccurate assertions about a proposal's impact which are not supported by any objective analysis, and furthermore, not determining similar cases in a consistent manner. So should the inspector consider that any of the reasons offered tonight to refuse this planning permission, this planning application, those are some of the reasons in which an inspector may make a cost application against the council. But of course, members are entitled to take their own directly, of course.
Chair, can I take exception to the wording from the officer there about vague and random statements? I don't think the evidence provided by members on this committee is vague and random statements, whatever your wording was, and I don't think that's appropriate.
I think that's the legal definition.
I was
Rather than it's aimed at any of you, it's a definition that you need to be aware of. It wasn't aimed at any of you, but what I'd also say, and you know this, from Hancock and from sitting on planning is that anecdotal evidence doesn't cut it. We all know anecdotal evidence in our area. I can tell you why it's a bad idea that we could in the meadow. You know, that there is, maybe the wording isn't helpful, but anecdotal rather than data-driven information is what we're looking at. Okay.
Sorry, if I can just clarify, I was just reading from the planning practice guidance, making comments on thank you.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't us.
Yeah, just to say, Chair, we are members, unworked members of the planning committee. If it is a matter that every decision has to be tempered by this issue of an appeal, we just have got to set up a set of algorithms, put the application in, and if it works, it's passed or it don't pass. And really, there's little point in us being here at all. That's not the case. It's not the first appeal that we would have to defend. And to be brutally honest with you, if an inspector looked at it and was to award these punitive costs that you're suggesting, because we are being so outrageous to suggest that we are concerned about people travelling up and down this road, then do you know what? We'll have to take that on the chin, don't we? And then necessarily not representative. But Chair, I think we need to make our own decision here, accept the advice we're given, but not be worried into doing something different.
Okay. I'm going to find myself in the rarity and supporting Councillor Bowman, and I'm going to move this to the vote. So, the recommendation is to recommend to grant subject conditions. All those in favour? Oh, seconder, sorry. Councillor Sutton. All those in favour?
2 in favour.
All those against?
9 against.
And any abstentions? Thank you. So, our usual process in this situation is that we are sitting in limbo until the office, you know this, we're going to do it in a minute. The office is going to take it away, they're going to write some recommendations for us. We will refuse them, we will come back to the next meeting and we will agree with which will be a different group of people, so that's going to be really exciting, I assume, because you, well, one of them's definitely not going to be here. So I'm going to move forward with the deferral as it stands at the moment with the absolute understanding that it will be refused at the next meeting. It's not another open to spare. Yeah.
Clarification, perhaps, we're not exposed for delaying a decision, are we, as a consequence of putting it? Well, then why don't we make this decision now? I would be, because that's what we always used to do.
No, we did.
It's not the reason we now do it a different way. And we always used to get that supportive advice from the officers if we went against the officers. They would give us the reasons, whether or not they might have crossed their fingers behind their backs when they told us, but that's what they told us. I would be happy to have the chair and also, as you are the portfolio holder, to work with the officers to it and to discuss it with me and to all the other members, the appropriate reasons to be shared, so we get them to receive reasons for refusal and get it done quickly, rather than elongate it until sometime June or July, which would be totally unnecessary in my view.
I'm
not exposed even.
I'm happy to do it now if you want, to be honest, just to get it done. I think we know what the reasons are, it's whether yeah.
So I would strongly advise caution to that approach. I'm not clear about your reasons for refusal, both in general terms, but also in terms of, more importantly, detailed technical approach. We, as officers, my officer, my team, are going to need time to consider your areas of concern, draft full technical reasons, linked to policies, linked to the evidence that we believe is available, and provide those reasons back to so you can then consider them properly. I am not comfortable in doing that in an adjournment this evening or through correspondence. I'm not comfortable with that.
So, Chair, if I can help further, I'm mindful of us being tripped over by missing a date. If that means calling the planning committee back again, properly constituted and within the time to make sure we don't miss no dates, I would suggest we would be doing that, Chair, rather than wait until the next planning commission and then we are automatically timed out? Thank you.
We are already out of time. We're already past the date, so we could, once termination would be tomorrow. To be honest.
And again, just further point, even in that situation, so between tonight and the May committee, which is when we would bring the technical reasons back to you, even if that were to lodge an appeal in that time frame, you can still consider and vote on those technical reasons. They would just go forward as part of our statement of case at the appeal. So you lost nothing by deferring.
Right, so back to what we're saying. If we're in a state of deferral at the moment, the reasons for refusal will be, as we're going to do in a minute, at the next application for this one. If, I don't want to steer anyone's thunder, we've got a similar situation here. So with the next agenda item, so you'll get an explanation of what's going to happen moving forward in the other situation. Okay.
So I just want to clarify, so you're asking us to go back to draft reasons for refusal based on highway safety.
Yeah, the logical, as I will say, if that is the case, if that's possible to say.
If you're seeking advice, then I would struggle to find substantive reasons on ecology based on the information and the evidence that's in front of you, and even less so in terms of food production.
Can I say just let the officers
No, yeah, they have to take it from us.
Yeah.
That's the problem. So we do it to. I'm wondering whether having listened to the argument, I'm not saying whether it's my opinion or not, but having listened to the argument, there is an issue about design and whether the design is usable given the arguments about that. You can say that if you want.
Highway safety is my hearing the debate, which is a very good and rich debate. Hearing that debate, my feeling is that your main concern is about highway safety, and I'm asking for clarity in terms of whether you want officers to go away and draft reasons for refusal based on highway safety. First question. And then, are there any other areas you want us to draft reasons for refusal, or is it just highway safety?
Councillor Hannaford.
If it helps, Chair, I think in many ways this development, albeit smaller, mirrors the car-driven concerns that we had from the previous application that we've turned down. I think many of those reasons flow from that, because if we don't think that children can walk to school safely, or when people get older and they can't drive, or they want to use public transport, etc., that all of that factors into this. So I think there would be some reasons for refusal, which, although it's a separate application, would be applicable to this development. To me, it's about sustainability. It's about future-proofing this development. It's all the policies apparently we have about making this us a walking and cycling city, and everything's integrated and all the rest of it. And I can't remember which member said that. I think it was Councillor Sutton, who said that, or maybe it was Councillor Ward, said that this is an enclosed development facing out on the road. And in terms of the safety and sustainability, you know, you could entirely understand why people on this new development would get in their cars because they don't have any other option. There is no path that they can link up to go anywhere or adjustments. So there may be in future, when it's widely sorted out, whenever that happens, but we have to judge this obviously as it is today. So I think there are some grounds for refusal, very similar to the larger development that we've had before. And as I said before, I'm not against it in principle. I think it could be made sustainable to have that linkage. But if the developer is not willing to do that, then I think we have to go and be confident about that and make a decision and go down that route and let the officers find some reasons that we can base this on. I don't think it's appropriate that we also have to argue with our own officers to get a decision made at the planning committee.
Councillor Mitchell and Moore, in whatever order you want to go.
Thank you, Chair. Just following up from Councillor Hampton, I think the emphasis has got to be on the pedestrian and cyclist safety of people who are going to live on this site. That's the direct relationship to this application. Whilst we fully possibly favour development on the site with a number of properties. Let's forget the number at the moment. What I'm concerned about is the future safety of these as they are pedestrians using that lack of pathway and the cyclists using that area. There's an increase in numbers. And hopefully, I was hoping that somebody would actually think about the future when other developments in the area are going to take place as well, so we can enjoy that thinking. Hence the need to speak to County Harvard.
Not confident cyclists will be able to use that pathway the way we just on this time, but Councillor Moore.
I remain concerned about the contamination issue. The officer's report says, and the report is included about the mediation strategy, which we looked at. It says, with this condition, the proposal is not considered to generate significant contamination risks and is acceptable, but it doesn't say acceptable for what, and it doesn't explain risk posed by significant contamination. Not to consider to generate significant contamination risk, so the overall risk is not set out in the report sufficient to give me confidence that it's acceptable regardless whether people might grow food, unless these houses then have to be sold with a warning in that section that's going to have the land development that they are not allowed to do that. So I think it's really important that we're clear on this.
In which case, well, at some point, someone's going to make a decision around the chair, so it's going to be me. Around highway safety and sustainability, I completely understand what you're saying, but it's acceptable is where the line ends. And in policy moving forward, I think you've made a really good suggestion to talk to the local plans team about how we can strengthen up what acceptable is. But at the moment, there is no point in taking something to appeal when we know it's acceptable to those standards. And we don't have stronger standards. And I'm very concerned about how weak our argument already is on this one, Councillor.
Can I move this to the vote, please, Chair?
So before we do that, so I could just play back the broad area of concern, so we're clear on that, and if you're happy, it's going to be meeting. So your key area of concerns that you're meeting is based on highway safety and sustainability, and in particular, the lack of an adequate and safe access for pedestrians onto the highway. Are there any other areas of concern that you want us to track? Further reasons for refusal, or is that, does that cover it?
I propose the further reason for concern.
I'm happy to take that to the vote.
I just need clarification that isn't, I get it by the way, and I will accept the character of anybody who lives there in the future. But what I need to know, Chair, is whether or not, if we were to put it in, is that a material consideration that we should be considering? That's all I need to know. I'm not talking it down, because I don't want us, because we have a danger of putting too much in, and then it weakens the argument. That's all what I'm concerned with. Is the material consideration we can rely?
At this point in time, that level of concern about contamination would not necessarily be a material consideration. It would be different if it was, for instance, land being proposed for allotments or something like that, but we don't have anything in the residential design guide or in policy to require housing to be at a much higher level than it currently is.
Yeah, Chair, just to say the snow center, their answer to mitigate that would be tarmac everywhere. You can't ruin it, you know, that would be indication.
And given that it's been put forward and it wants, we want to take it to the vote, someone could second it and we'll take it to the vote, and then with due process we'll vote on it. So do you propose it, would someone like to second? Okay, then I'll second it to put it to the vote. In relation to contamination, we've heard what's said, but I'd like the committee to now vote on it. All those in favour of it being a reason for refusal, please raise your hand. All those against?
7 against.
And I'm guessing one an abstention. Thanks very much. Right, so due process, it follows on that one. It is a conversation I'd like to have in the future regarding the local plans moving forward. So, the reasons given, we are deferring at the moment. and we will get the report back at the next committee meeting, whether that's to make a final decision or for it to be able to let us go forward, okay? That makes sense?
We made one decision,
You decided not to follow the recommendation. At the moment, we have not given our reasons for refusal. We're in deferral like we do every other time we've done this for an application. You're about to go on to the next item, which is the reasons for refusal at Grant. That was exactly the same situation last time. Councillor Foley went there, so you wouldn't miss that, okay? So that's, in a minute, you'll be able to understand what's going to happen in the next meeting point, okay? So, we are in limbo, we're at deferral, and we've got our reasons. The officers will come back to the next meeting. I'm sure Councillor Simon is very good, she's going to tell me. I am going to propose a motion to vote on a deferral based on highway safety. Do I have a second? No, this one for deferral, reasons for deferral. Yeah, I know, I get as much as you do clearly. It's moved and seconded. All of those favour highways and pedestrian safety, all those in favour, unanimous decision.
Yes, unanimous, Chair.
Could we just have a simple committee, one week before it would be really nice. Okay, the second item on our substantial item on our agenda today is deferred applications considering detailed reasons for approval or refusal, and the planning application is number 221774, land adjacent to Growell and Fleming Way, Growell, Exeter. I'm pass over to Chris to explain why this one's confusing.
Second, just finding my notes. So this application was deferred at the last committee to allow technical reasons for refusal to be clarified. Since that committee, an appeal has been submitted to the planning inspectorate for non-determination, but we haven't had this verified from the planning inspectorate yet. It was only submitted on Friday, so we haven't had any correspondence through. Because of this, a decision cannot be issued on this particular proposal, as the regulations that would allow such a decision to be made has not been enacted. However, should you be minded, we can still put forward reasons for refusal, which I'll go through in a second, which will be used in the council's position against the non-determination appeal. So in terms of the refusal reason put forward by the officers, it was the concern from members was in relation to the divergence in design and appearance between the proposed development and the surrounding landscape, and the incongruous position, layout, external materials, and architectural detailing. The reason for refusal put forward by officers is therefore, I'll just read it in full for you. The proposal is contrary to paragraph 130 of the National Planning Policy Framework, the National Design Guide, Objective 9, and policies C4, CP17 of the Local Development Framework Core Strategy, policies DG1A, B, D, G, H, and I of the Local Plan First Review, and Chapter 7 of the Residential Design Supplementary Planning Document. By virtue of the position, size, layout, and design of the proposed dwellings, it would A, result in overdevelopment within a designed housing estate, which is incongruous with its distinct landscape and design character, and B, result in development out of character with the urban grain, massing, fenestration, and materials used within the surrounding designed housing estate, having a detrimental impact on the overall quality of the area, specifically its character, appearance, and layout. Thank you.
So, in layman's terms, since we decided we'd like to refuse this application, an appeal for non-determination has happened. That means we no longer believe, well, we no longer have control of the application. So, in the absence of being able to determine the application, we would determine the reasons we would have refused it. So that would be part of our defence when we are at the non-determination appeal. Also, in the result, in the situation, so if I get this right, the planning inspector decides it's not a valid appeal, just for belts and braces, we would decide that we confused it. So does that make sense to everybody? No more questions? Because I'm confused enough as it is.
No, I assume this is a parallel situation to what could happen with the previous application.
I think, yeah, and I think if those of you who are back on the committee could really clearly remember this, whether it's me chairing it or not, the chair will probably appreciate that memory, okay? So, would anyone else like to speak to it, or do we just want to read the vote? How are we all feeling about it?
Just a comment, it was well worth waiting to hear that, very considerably, and I appreciate the officers, although they recommended one way in actually bringing forward the views of the committee, and I appreciate that, and I know they'll do that every time we may or may not make a decision that goes against them. So thank you, I wanted that to be.
Thank you very much, and yes, thank you to all the officers that have been involved in this sat here, so thanks to the planning team and thanks to opinions, including those who may have been involved in the original grant or application. We are very grateful to them for having done that. So, I'm going to move the recommendation for the last time, probably. Councillor Sutton's going to second it. And I wonder if you could all vote in favour? Those in favour? Thank you very much. So, the next item on the agenda is the list of decisions made and withdrawn applications. I assume I'm asking you, have you any questions asking you on that? No? Yes. Oh, hello. There's supposed to be one more, but I don't know if we're going to make that.
I apologise for not writing it in advance of my question. I'm happy to receive the answer in writing after. I'm just interested to know why the installation of solar panels on the campus was refused.
It was not a decision, so I'm going to see if any of the officers know the answer. We will get you a written reply on that, Councillor Moore. Thank you. And the final substantive item is the appeals report. We've got one new appeal and no applicants for any other appeals. Any questions on that one? Okay, the night site inspection party will be advised, and now we're going to indulge the chair. This is the last municipal planning committee of one of our members, and I also think it should be mentioned that Yolanda Henson sat on this committee for as long as I can remember, and has only come off it in the last year because she was Lord Mayor, and she probably took her other Lord Mayoralty off as well, or a Mayoralty off as well. So I just wanted to put on record the service that Yolanda brought to this, because I know she sat here and argued with my dad, goodness knows she is, how many years ago, and then she spent the end of her career arguing with me about planning applications, so it feels like a nice bookend, but I think we need to record that. She was chair as well, yes, she was. Moving on to another former chair of the planning committee, Councillor Sutton is sitting on the last ever planning committee, and although she has to do two other small committees, this is her last big committee that she will sit on before her retirement at the local elections. When I first joined planning and I joined the committee, she'd just taken over chair from Councillor Alec, and she had been a very steady mind and very influential in understanding that sometimes the intricacies of planning outweigh some of our opinions and our feelings on things. It's not to say she won't vote against things, because she will, she thinks there's a good planning reason for it, and she has famously been in private eye as a result of one of her decisions that she made on a planning application. So I just wanted to say, I think from lots of people, including Councillor Bialik and Hannaford, who probably sat Aaron Branston with her for a very long time, some of the more recent members, a massive thank you to Rachel for all she did as portfolio holder of planning and as the planning chair and as the deputy leader and all the other wonderful things you've done along the years, and I just wish you a very happy retirement and thank you.
Thank you, that was very kind. It has been an interesting journey, particularly on this committee.
That's the end of the meeting. Hopefully we'll all see each other again soon. The other side of the election. Good night.